I'm a little nervous today, but I like that feeling. I'm going diving, and it's always surprising to me just how simple it is to get all your gear together. To get started diving, all you really need is a wetsuit. I got a top and a bottom here, pair of booties, some gloves, fins, and your mask and snorkel. That's really it. I'm not bringing any weights today because I'm just sight fishing. I'm not going to be diving down, and even if I wanted to dive down, it would be impossible with the 7mm wetsuit. These are way more buoyant than a life jacket, and it's way more safe than going out there than people think. Kind of my opinion, but I think it's the truth. This is what we're using today. A fishing rod with a snare. I took a look at the water and it looks like it's been filtered through a Brita filter. Now to get the crabs coming closer, I've got a bait bag filled with mackerel and squid. I've got that attached to a buoy, and I've got my own buoy attached to my crab gauge, and I'm hoping this thing is going to get filled up. So without further ado, let's change our clothes and hop in and get started. If I didn't do this, I wouldn't be able to slip into it. I think the hardest part about today is going to be how to get back on land. Looks like a pretty easy entry point, but sometimes the swells come in and it really makes it turbulent. So that's the only thing I gotta watch out for, I think. And, you know, sharks, I guess. All right, here we go. I'll get this thing later.
Ready?
I feel like a bit of a hypocrite telling you this, but you should always have a dive buddy when you go out in the water. There were a couple times that I felt a little unsafe today, and it just makes you feel a little bit better if you have someone with you. So past that first rocky area, it's all sand and about 15 feet deep. Getting out there, I saw absolutely no signs of crab at all. I thought maybe they were camouflage, but later on I realized that if there's crab there, you're going to see them. I dropped the snare down and dragged it around, hoping that something would come. About 15 minutes later, I came back and saw that my bait bag had a crab on it. Now, where did this crab come from? I wish I could stay out there for 12 hours straight so I could see the low tide and high tide and see which one is more productive. It really amazed me to see how slow the crabs drop, or when I drop the snare, how slow it drops also. It's a 7-ounce snare, by the way. After this, I was swimming around just trying to see anything, and I saw my first crab. It was headed to my bait bag about 20 feet away, but you can clearly see distinct legs, and as soon as I dropped the snare, it went right towards it. I can only imagine if it was a productive day and the ocean floor was littered with crab, how easy it would be to get your limits of jumbo crab because you'd have your pick on anything you want. This crab is 6 inches wide, but when it was on the sand, it looked like it was an undersized crab. It's funny how the perspective of things change when you're diving or when you're underwater. Things either look way smaller or way bigger than they actually are, so you always have to have some type of gauge with you. As I swam away from that bag, I spotted 2 crab, and they weren't doing anything. They were just looking at each other down there, the only crabs in sight. But as you can see, it dropped that snare down, and immediately the crab goes for it. So easy. This is so easy. Besides getting over your fear of getting eaten by a shark, or claustrophobia, or drowning, it's so easy. Another 6.5 incher this time. Love you guys, by the way. I almost dropped the fishing rod right here, and that made me think, next time I do this, I'm going to have the fishing rod either on my wrist, I'll have the crab gauge on my wrist, and I'll have the bag on my waist, so I don't have anything floating around that I have to swim to. So I got that first crab of the two, and now I'm trying to get the second one. The current is really strong, so dropping the 7-ounce weight, you really have to position yourself over the crab, and once you get it down, you can kind of jig it closer and closer, and once that crab picks up the scent, it's irresistible to it. It always goes for the snare. And this really spooked me. I thought that was a shark for a second, but just a mola mola. Now you can see that big bow in the fishing line. That's where the current is pulling it. So it's just got to work that snare closer and closer to the crab. And once the crab is on the snare, he wraps his claws onto the cage to try to eat. And when he does that, the snare loops cover the claw, and you can pull it up and he'll get snared just like this. If the crab just has one claw or no claws at all, that's a whole nother story. I really want to train my body to be ready for these opportunities. A lot of the times when you come out to the coast, the water is murky, but occasionally it is crystal clear. And just to be able to have a dive suit, spear gun, or a small fishing rod like this, just in case the opportunity presents itself, that's what I really want to be ready for at all times when I go to the coast now. I'm 3 crab in, a little bit over an hour into the dive, and I'm starting to feel real relaxed and comfortable. So relaxed that I forget the snorkels in my mouth, and a couple times I almost start breathing normally. Can't be doing that. So about 20-30 minutes later, I go back to the bag, and I see there's 2 crab on it. Now where did these crab come from? See the crab on the outside? It has no claws, which is kind of an interesting thing, because I tried to snare that crab for about 15 minutes later, and I cannot get it. But when the crabs have their claws, it's a sure thing you're going to get it with the snare, usually the first time. There's another 6-incher. It is very possible to get motion sickness when you're diving, so I did take half a seasickness pill, and at the end of the dive, I still started to feel it, so that's something to be aware of if you want to try this. Now take a look at this crab closely. I'm trying to snare it, and this is about 10 minutes of trying to snare it, but next, you see that thing pop up? It's another crab in the sand. And that just makes me think that there might be hundreds of crab around this area, but they're buried for some reason. Are they just filter feeding under there? Are they afraid of the strong currents or swell? Are they waiting for females to arrive? Maybe it's the pressure or the moon phase or the tide. Who knows? It seemed totally random, but there's got to be a missing piece to the puzzle. We've got to figure that out. That's why I wish I could be out there for 12 hours and see all the different phases. And this crab just disappeared. He had no claws. He's probably been through some battles, which makes me think they obviously have some type of intelligence, especially this crab having been through hell and back, losing both its claws, now having the opportunity of a free meal presented to him right in front of his face, but he chooses to forego it because he knows something is out of the ordinary, buries himself, waiting for a better chance. Very interesting. At this point, it was about an hour and a half into the dive, and the current started to pick up. The more I paddled and kicked with my legs, the more the sand pattern on the bottom seemed to stay still. That made me a little worried, and I knew I'd better get out of there quick. Oh gosh, that cave on the side gave me flashbacks of when I almost drowned the first time I went diving for abalone. The current was so strong, I'm trying to get up there. But with that 7mm wetsuit, at no time did I feel I was in danger. You just float around and get washed around in the current until the opportunity arises to get back on shore.
Man, I've been wanting to do that for 2 years. Now I can finally say I did it. 4 crab, pretty dang good. I wish it was a limit, but I didn't want to push myself too hard. I was getting a little tired and it seemed like the water was getting a bit murky. I got here at 10 a.m. It was a 6-foot high tide and it's dropping down to a -1 at 4. So I'm kind of thinking that as the tide rises, that's when the crab come in, and then maybe when it's at that peak, they start to hide, and they hide under the sand, or I'm not really sure why, but there weren't that many crabs, surprisingly. But boy, am I hungry. You can see it's a male crab from the apron there, it's pointy. And I want to keep some of the crab butter from the carapace here. I'm going to boil the crab, but I do differentiate between the guts and the crab butter. So I want to take as many of the guts out as I can. Crab is really one of the easiest seafoods that you can make. All you really got to do is boil some water and that's it. There we go. Wow, perfect. Shoes didn't even get wet. I'd rather not boil it with all the lungs, all the gills attached. I'm gonna take those off. I push this down. Its stomach is in there somewhere. So rather than boiling all of that, I'd rather get rid of it all first. I'm not really sure what all that red stuff is. What is that red stuff? Anybody know? So that's the crab butter, as they call it. And it's got some of that red stuff. I'm not really sure what to do with that. Keep it or toss it? What would you say? I'm gonna toss as much as I can. I'm gonna put the rest back in the crab. Kinda looks like uni, a little bit. Not really a necessary step, but it's nice to clean as much sand off the sides as you can. There's a good amount of grime on some of these crab. It's about 12 to 15 minutes per big crab. There he goes, and I'll just put the carapace right there on top. Here's a closer look at the crab butter after it's been kind of blanched. What is that exactly? Does anybody know? Besides delicious? My 20 push-ups, and this crab should be done. Ooh, yeah. Gonna add some butter to the crab butter. Not heating quite as fast in the pan, so I'll do it right over the flame. Put a little pepper in there. I really wanted to get my limit, but how could you complain about that? Ooh, let's taste this dipping sauce with the crab butter and regular butter, a little salt and pepper. Only thing is missing is the garlic, but mild, savory, no bitter taste at all. I like it, I like it. Gonna split this crab in half. Yes. Haven't eaten all day. Ready to dig into this. Nice knuckle. Just put it right in there. Oh, that would be great on a crab sandwich. Reheat that butter. Probably like 10 years ago or so, I would be so reluctant to try this crab butter. But I'm really happy I came around to it because it's a flavor that you don't get very often. It just adds a whole nother layer to the crab. Can't let all this butter go to waste. Gotta eat it all. Dang, with some rice. You guys were right. Whoever left those comments talking about the crab butter and rice, that's the one. So what can you take from this video? I'm thinking if you're a diver and you live near the water, especially if you know that there's crab there occasionally, just go visit the beach, see if the water is clear. If it's clear, bring your little fishing rod. Because, yeah, what I also learned out there, they won't come to the bait right away. Those 2 that I got with the snare, they were only about 50 feet away from that big bait bag. So if you can swim around and find them, just pick them up. They don't care, they'll grab onto anything. So easy if you can find them. All right, I got a couple crab for the family. I'll go enjoy that with Sarah, and I'll see you guys next time. Damn, that was so good.